What I'm about to tell you will make you think twice about every mall Santa you've ever seen. A 7-year-old boy went to meet Santa Claus on a busy Saturday in December 1988. He was excited, clutching his Christmas list, wearing his favorite red sweater. 15 minutes later, he had vanished without a trace. For 10 years, his family searched desperately, following every lead, chasing every hope. Then, in 1998, someone found an old photo album at a garage sale. Inside was a picture that would crack this case wide open and reveal a truth so disturbing, it would change Christmas forever for an entire community. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this unfolds, and let me know in the comments, do you remember visiting mall Santas as a kid? What was that experience like for you? December 17th, 1988. The Oakwood Mall in Dayton, Ohio was packed with last-minute Christmas shoppers. Families with children waited in long lines to visit Santa's workshop, an elaborate setup complete with elves, reindeer decorations, and a throne where Santa would pose for photos with excited kids. The air smelled like cinnamon pretzels and hot chocolate, and jingle bells played endlessly over the sound system. 7-year-old Michael Chen was practically vibrating with excitement as he waited in line with his mother, Linda. Michael had been talking about this visit for weeks, carefully writing and rewriting his Christmas list until it was perfect. He wanted a new bicycle, some action figures, and most importantly, he wanted to ask Santa to help his dad find a better job. Michael's father, Robert, had been laid off from the factory 3 months earlier, and even at 7 years old, Michael could sense the stress in his household. Linda Chen, a petite woman with kind eyes and an infectious laugh, watched her son bounce from foot to foot as they moved closer to Santa's throne. She'd brought her camera, one of those disposable ones from the pharmacy, to capture Michael's big moment. This would be his first time meeting Santa without his older sister, Jennifer, who was at a friend's birthday party. The Santa at Oakwood Mall that year was new. Harold Zimmerman was a retired postal worker who had volunteered to play Santa for the holiday season. At 58, he had the perfect build for the role, round belly, rosy cheeks, and a genuine love for children that made his ho-ho-hos sound authentic. The mall management had been thrilled to find him after their regular Santa had moved to Florida. But here's where the story takes its first strange turn. What Linda Chen didn't know was that Harold Zimmerman had never actually applied to be Santa at Oakwood Mall. Someone else had submitted his application and references, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. As Michael finally reached the front of the line, a teenage elf named Rachel Williams guided him toward Santa's throne. She remembered Michael clearly because he was so polite, saying "please" and "thank you" to everyone he met. He climbed onto Santa's lap with a huge grin, his missing front teeth making his smile even more adorable. Ho, ho, ho. "What's your name, young man?" Santa asked, his voice warm and grandfatherly. "Michael Chen," the boy announced proudly. "I've been really good this year, Santa. Well, mostly good. I accidentally broke my mom's vase last month, but I told the truth about it." Linda snapped photos as Michael pulled out his carefully folded Christmas list. Santa listened intently as the boy read each item, nodding seriously at each request. When Michael got to the part about his dad needing a job, Santa's expression grew thoughtful. "That's a very unselfish wish, Michael," Santa said. "I can tell you really love your family." "I do," Michael beamed. "My mom makes the best cookies, and my dad tells the funniest jokes, even when he's sad." This is where the official story ends. Linda Chen took her photos. Michael hugged Santa goodbye, and they walked toward the exit of Santa's workshop. Linda stopped to buy a pretzel for Michael from a nearby vendor. She turned around to hand it to him, and her son was gone. Gone. In the space of 30 seconds, in a crowded mall during the busiest shopping day of the week, 7-year-old Michael Chen had vanished completely. Linda's screams brought mall security running. Within minutes, the entire mall was in lockdown. Every exit was sealed, every store was searched, every employee was questioned. The Dayton Police Department arrived with search dogs and additional officers. They interviewed every family who had been in Santa's workshop that day. But here's what baffled investigators. The security cameras showed Michael leaving Santa's workshop with his mother, walking toward the pretzel stand. Then nothing. It was as if he had simply evaporated into thin air. Detective Ray Morrison, who had worked missing children cases for 12 years, told reporters that he'd never seen anything like it. "A child doesn't just disappear in a mall this crowded," he said. Someone had to have seen something. The investigation revealed several troubling details. First, the Santa they'd been using wasn't supposed to be working that day. Harold Zimmerman's schedule showed he was meant to start the following Monday, but someone had called the mall management claiming there was a schedule change. Second, 3 different witnesses reported seeing a man in a Santa suit leaving through the mall's employee entrance around the time Michael disappeared. But when police checked, Harold Zimmerman was still in Santa's workshop, greeting the next child in line. Wait, let me ask you something. How is it possible for Santa to be in 2 places at once? Keep watching, because the answer to that question will reveal the most sinister Christmas conspiracy you've ever heard. The search for Michael Chen consumed the Dayton community. Volunteers distributed thousands of flyers with his school photo, a sweet-faced boy with dark hair and bright eyes, wearing the same red sweater he'd had on when he disappeared. The local news ran the story every night. America's Most Wanted featured Michael's case twice. Linda and Robert Chen appeared on every talk show that would have them. Linda couldn't speak without crying, clutching Michael's favorite stuffed animal, a brown teddy bear named Mr. Buttons that Michael had slept with every night since he was 2. Robert, a quiet man who rarely showed emotion, seemed to age 10, years in the weeks following Michael's disappearance. "Someone knows where our boy is," Robert said during one particularly heartbreaking television interview. "Someone is keeping him from coming home to us. We just want him back. We won't even press charges. We just want our Michael home for Christmas." But Christmas came and went. Michael's presents remained wrapped under the tree until Valentine's Day, when Linda finally couldn't bear to look at them anymore. His sister Jennifer, just 9 years old herself, started having nightmares about monsters taking children from malls. The FBI joined the investigation after the first week. Agent Sarah Martinez, who specialized in child abduction cases, brought resources and expertise that local police couldn't match. But even with federal involvement, the leads dried up quickly. They investigated Harold Zimmerman thoroughly. His background check came back clean. No criminal history, no red flags. He'd been a model postal employee for 32 years before retiring. His neighbors described him as quiet but friendly, the kind of man who shoveled elderly neighbors' driveways without being asked. But Agent Martinez found something odd about Zimmerman's Santa application. The handwriting didn't match his other documents. Someone else had filled out the paperwork and forged his signature. When confronted, Zimmerman broke down completely. "I thought I was doing a good deed," he sobbed to investigators. "A woman called me and said the mall needed emergency Santa coverage. She said someone had recommended me from my church. I never filled out any application. I just showed up when she told me to. The woman who had called Zimmerman was never identified. The phone number she'd given him was disconnected. The references on his application led to fake addresses and non-existent people." This was when Agent Martinez realized they weren't dealing with a random abduction. This was a carefully planned operation that had used Harold Zimmerman as an unwitting cover. As 1989 turned into 1990 and then 1991, the case grew cold. The Chens never gave up hope, but the active investigation wound down. Linda Chen kept Michael's room exactly as he'd left it, right down to the Lego castle he'd been building on his desk. Robert threw himself into his new job at a different factory, working overtime to pay for private investigators and reward money. Every Christmas was agony for the family. They couldn't bring themselves to visit malls during the holiday season. The sound of jingle bells would send Linda into crying fits. They moved to a different house in 1993, unable to bear living in the place where Michael's ghost seemed to lurk in every corner. But the Chen family's nightmare was far from over. In fact, the worst revelation was still 10 years away. What happened next would expose a network of criminals so sophisticated and so evil that it would make national headlines and change how we think about child safety forever. But are you ready for this? The truth about what happened to Michael Chen is something that will stay with you long after this video ends. In December 1998, exactly 10 years after Michael's disappearance, a woman named Dorothy Patterson was browsing a garage sale in suburban Cleveland, Ohio. Dorothy collected vintage photo albums, and she spotted an interesting leather-bound album buried under a pile of old books. The seller, an elderly man clearing out his deceased brother's house, let her have it for $5. Dorothy took the album home and began looking through it that evening. The photos seemed to span several decades, showing various families and children in what appeared to be normal, happy moments. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations. But as Dorothy looked more closely, something seemed off about the pictures. The children in the photos looked nervous, forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. And in many of the pictures, there was the same man, tall, thin, with graying hair and cold eyes. He appeared with different families, always positioned as if he belonged, but there was something predatory about his presence in every shot. Then Dorothy turned to a page that made her heart stop. There, in a photo dated Christmas 1988, was a little boy she recognized from years of missing child flyers and news reports. Michael Chen, wearing his red sweater, sitting on this strange man's lap in what appeared to be a home setting, not a mall. The boy wasn't smiling. He looked terrified. Dorothy called the FBI immediately. Agent Martinez, who had never stopped thinking about the Michael Chen case, was in Cleveland the next morning. What they found in that photo album would break the case wide open and reveal one of the most sophisticated child trafficking rings in American history. The album contained over 200 photos spanning 20 years, showing dozens of children who had been reported missing from malls, parks, and schools across the Midwest. The man in the photos was identified as Dr. Edmund Reeves, a retired psychiatrist who had specialized in treating troubled children. On the surface, he was a pillar of his community in Cleveland, volunteered at children's charities, donated to schools, even played Santa Claus at local hospitals. But Dr. Reeves had been running something far more sinister than anyone imagined. He had created an entire network of fake families, complete with forged documents and assumed identities, to place kidnapped children with couples who couldn't legally adopt. These weren't desperate families looking for children to love. They were wealthy people who treated children like possessions, buying them through Reeves's network and keeping them isolated from the outside world. The investigation that followed was massive. FBI agents raided properties in 6 states. They found evidence of at least 47 children who had been kidnapped and sold through Reeves's operation over 2 decades. Some of the children had been moved multiple times between different families as they grew older and became less desirable to their captors. The fake Santa operation at Oakwood Mall had been just one of many methods Reeves used to abduct children. He had accomplices working as mall employees, school volunteers, and even police officers. They would identify target children, study their families' routines, and then create elaborate scenarios to separate the children from their parents. But here's the question that kept Agent Martinez awake at night. After 10 years, was Michael Chen still alive? And if so, where was he? The breakthrough came when agents searched Dr. Reeves's personal residence in Cleveland. Hidden in a secret room behind his basement office, they found meticulous records of every child who had passed through his network. Each file contained photos, medical records, and detailed notes about the child's placement with various families. Michael Chen's file was 3 inches thick. The record showed that he had been moved between 4 different families over the 10 years since his abduction. The last entry was dated just 6 months earlier, indicating that he had been placed with a family named the Hendersons in rural Michigan. 27 FBI agents surrounded the Henderson property on a cold February morning in 1999. They expected resistance, possibly violence. What they found instead was a 17-year-old boy chopping firewood behind a farmhouse, completely unaware that the world had been searching for him for a decade. Michael Chen, now calling himself David Henderson, had grown into a tall, lean teenager with the same dark hair and bright eyes his parents remembered. But he showed no signs of recognizing the agents who approached him. As far as he knew, the Hendersons were his real family, and his name had always been David. The psychological damage was extensive. Dr. Reeves had used sophisticated brainwashing techniques to make the kidnapped children forget their original identities. Michael had been told that his real parents had died in a car accident when he was 7, and that the Hendersons had lovingly adopted him. He had memories of visiting Dr. Reeves regularly for therapy to help him deal with his supposed trauma, but he had no recollection of his life before the age of 8. The reunion between Michael and his family was unlike anything the FBI agents had ever witnessed. Linda Chen collapsed when she saw her son for the first time in 10 years. Robert stood frozen, unable to believe that the tall teenager before him was the 7-year-old boy who had vanished from the mall. But Michael, David, didn't recognize them at all. To him, these crying strangers were just people who claimed to be his family. He kept asking when he could go home to the Hendersons, not understanding why he was being kept from the only parents he could remember. The deprogramming process took months. Slowly, with the help of specialist therapists, Michael began to recover fragments of his real memories. The breakthrough came when Linda brought Mr. Buttons, his old teddy bear, to one of their supervised visits. Michael stared at the bear for a long moment, then suddenly burst into tears. "I remember him," he whispered. "I remember sleeping with him when I was scared." More memories followed. Christmas mornings with Jennifer, his dad's terrible jokes, his mum's cookies, the Lego castle he'd been building in his room. Each recovered memory was like a piece of his stolen childhood returning to him. Michael chose to reclaim his real name and his real family, but the adjustment was incredibly difficult. He was 17 years old, about to graduate high school, but emotionally, he was dealing with the trauma of learning that his entire life had been a lie. The Hendersons, who had genuinely believed they were caring for an orphaned child, were devastated to learn they had been unknowing participants in a kidnapping. The trial of Dr. Edmund Reeves and his network became one of the most watched criminal proceedings of the 1990s. Reeves was ultimately convicted of 47 counts of kidnapping, human trafficking, and child endangerment. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During his sentencing, Reeves showed no remorse. He told the court that he had been providing loving homes for unwanted children and that he was a humanitarian, not a criminal. The judge, visibly disgusted, told Reeves that he had stolen not just children but their entire identities and futures. 23 other members of Reeves's network were also convicted and sentenced to prison terms ranging from 15 years to life. The fake families who had unknowingly participated in the scheme were generally not prosecuted, as most had genuinely believed they were adopting orphaned children through legitimate channels. Of the 47 children identified as victims of Reeves' network, 31 were successfully reunited with their biological families. 12 had aged out of the system and chose to remain with their adoptive families who had treated them well despite the illegal circumstances of their placement. 4 children were never found and their cases remain open. Harold Zimmerman, the unwitting Santa who had been used as cover for Michael's abduction, never recovered from the guilt of his unknowing participation. He suffered a heart attack during the trial and died before seeing Reeves convicted. In his final interview, he said, "I just wanted to make children happy at Christmas. I never imagined someone would use that to hurt them." Michael Chen graduated from high school in 2000 and went on to study psychology in college. He said he wanted to help other children who had experienced trauma. He maintained relationships with both his biological family and the Hendersons, who had genuinely loved him during his years with them. In 2005, Michael married his college girlfriend and took her last name, choosing to start fresh with a new identity that was entirely his own choice. He and his wife have 2 children now, and he's determined to give them the normal, safe childhood that was stolen from him. Linda Chen became an advocate for missing children, working with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to improve mall security and screening procedures for seasonal employees like Santa Claus actors. She pushed for legislation requiring background checks and identity verification for anyone working in positions that gave them access to children. The Oakwood Mall, where Michael's nightmare began, installed a comprehensive security system with cameras covering every inch of the property. They also implemented a buddy system, requiring all Santa's workshop employees to work in pairs, making it much harder for criminals to operate undetected. But perhaps the most important legacy of Michael's case was the awareness it raised about how sophisticated child trafficking networks could operate. Dr. Reeves had used society's trust in authority figures, doctors, Santa Claus, even police officers, to gain access to children and carry out his crimes. The case also highlighted how victims of long-term abduction might not immediately recognize their rescue as liberation. Michael's initial resistance to reuniting with his family showed how effectively abductors could manipulate children's memories and identities. Today, Michael works as a child psychologist, specializing in recovered memory therapy. He splits his time between private practice and consulting with law enforcement on cases involving missing children. He still has gaps in his memory from his years with Dr. Reeves, but he's learned to see his experience as something that can help other families find their way back to each other. Every Christmas, Michael visits the Oakwood Mall, not to relive his trauma, but to remind himself how far he's come. He brings his own children to see Santa now, but he stays vigilant, watching for the signs he never knew to look for as a 7-year-old boy. The photo album that broke the case open is now housed in the FBI's archives as evidence of how criminals can hide in plain sight for decades. Dorothy Patterson, the woman who bought it at a garage sale, says she still gets chills thinking about how close those crimes came to never being discovered. It makes you wonder, she told reporters years later, how many other family photo albums are sitting in attics and garage sales, holding secrets that could solve cases and bring families back together. What do you think about Michael's incredible story? Could you imagine learning that your entire childhood was a lie? How do you think you would handle that kind of trauma? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story shows us anything, it's that we should never stop looking for the truth no matter how much time has passed. Sometimes the evidence we need is hiding in the most unexpected places, like a $5 photo album at a garage sale. If you found this story as compelling as I did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And remember, every missing child case matters, and every family deserves answers. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, where we'll explore another mystery that proves some Christmas miracles are darker than we ever imagined.